welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And despite what I had tweeted out about it, I don't actually hate Star Trek Discovery. It's just not Star Trek, that's all.
What is it? I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen anything about it.
So that's the thing that's supposed to entice everyone to sign up for CBS All Access. It's like the one original show on that entire streaming platform.
Okay.
So
and it's
good
not
luck
good?
with that. Well, it's it's like it's modern, right? Like everything's shot in the dark, the camera's all tilted, there's lots of lens flare, everybody's mean and angry and like disturbed in some way. So that's supposed to make them like,
edgy.
That or like relatable, I guess. But it's like, it's not Star Trek. Star Trek was like, they've overcome a lot of things. Things are better in the future, but I guess that's not supposed to be relatable. And they were saying originally that it was like part of the original, what they call prime timeline. But it clearly is not. The technology is 100% different. Everything looks different. The Klingons look nothing like Klingons. So it's like, it's
so what do they look like? They don't look like Klingons?
Well, not even close.
Where is it, like, timeline-wise?
It's supposed to be 10 years before the original series.
Why do we keep doing prequels? What was so great before?
I mean, the uniforms look somewhat reminiscent of the Enterprise uniforms, like the show Enterprise.
Okay.
So the uniforms are a little bit more reminiscent of that, but it's like it's only 10 years before, so how they got from there to the original series uniforms makes no sense.
They had like a blade of armor in that series at the beginning, right? They didn't have shields at first and everything.
Oh, it's like this version is completely like the communications is all holographic, which they clearly didn't have. They already have the like food replicators, which they didn't have in the original series. It's just it's if they just said this is a reboot, it's like it's taking some of the ideas of Star Trek, like having Starfleet and having the races and stuff like that, but we're just doing our own completely new spin on. I'd be like, all right, fine, do your thing. Yeah, I still don't think it's really Star Trek, but like, okay, whatever. But claiming that it's part of the like whatever, but as a show, it's fairly entertaining. There's some really stupid stuff in it.
Oh, the TSSL thing, Too Stupid to Live, or TSTL, Too Stupid to Live. It's my new. Well, that's not even my new thing, but it's just okay. So I watched the first 2 episodes of Van Helsing, which I clearly could get behind because I like everything about the premise. Just about we got vampires or zombies or vampires. I'm not really sure. I only got 2 episodes in, but it was literally 30 minutes into the first thing. I'm like, none of you people should be alive right now. Like, there's no way you made it to this point in the apocalypse. None of you got here. None of you did. I'm sorry. Just you were all dead a long time ago. Okay. There's just no chance.
No, it's not that kind of stupid in Star Trek. It's just the writing thing that happens in like every TV show where when you first meet a character, they give them some quirk or injury or something like that,
so you
right?
can remember them and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm.
Happens all the time, right? They introduce the character, they got a heart defect or they something happened to their eyes or whatever, and then like 5 episodes in, they completely forget that they ever talked about that, and they're if they had a heart defect, now they're running marathons. If they had problems with their eyes, now they're, don't need sunglasses anymore. Like, whatever it was, right? Well, this managed to forget it within about 20 minutes. Right? Like, they introduce the new captain. Like, you don't meet the new captain until the 3rd episode. But they introduce the new captain, and he's like, I was in this battle. My eyes were injured. I have to stay in the dark because it takes my eyes a long time to adjust to the light. And then 20 minutes later, he's watching an explosion out the window without even squinting. So I'm like, why even bother? Just say, I prefer the dark if you want to make him all mysterious. That's fine. That can be his quirk. Really,
maybe it's just we don't have enough money for lights. Like we're going for.
Well, they got enough money for a camera gimbal because man, do they not like to shoot anything with 90-degree angles? Oh, nice. Like everything's got to be Dutch angle.
What about the Orville one? The Orville one. Have you seen that?
Orville is more Star Trek than Star Trek Discovery, except Seth MacFarlane cannot stop himself from making penis jokes.
Well, yeah.
So I'm like, this would be a great show to watch with your kids if it weren't for the stupid, completely out of place humor. Like, there's some humor that's good. Like, okay, I really like the idea that here's your helmsman, and you tell him to fire upon something, and he fires upon it, and it blows up, and he goes, yeah, woohoo. And then the guy who's the commander who's in charge is like, calm down. That's not really appropriate. So the guy turns back around and like under his breath, he's like, woohoo, right? Like, okay, that's funny, right?
Right.
That's good humor, which you wouldn't see in normal Star Trek, but is totally fitting and I can totally get behind. And then you have to throw in some like off-color sex joke at the same like why? Just stop. But I mean, it's early in that series, so cut that part of it out, Seth MacFarlane, and you've got yourself a better version of Star Trek than the Star Trek that's on TV right now.
But it's supposed to be funny, right? It's a comedy.
Well, it's more Star Trek than comedy, which is why the bits, like some of the humor fits in and is good, and then some of it's like that is just, it doesn't fit in the rest of the show. Because it's like,
as Galaxy Quest is one of my all-time favorite movies, I could totally get behind this premise.
Yeah.
So,
but he can adjust. He's a smart guy. He'll listen. So
we'll see. All right, let's get into this. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to www.avrant.com and leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRantPodcast. YouTube.com/C/AVRant, where you can also see your questions being answered. I believe where videos are being now updated.
Yeah, the individual videos are. Austin is catching back up. He felt bad. He apologizes to everyone. We told him he really doesn't need to.
No, he doesn't have to apologize.
He's a good guy. That's the way he is. So.
Yeah.
Pass that along.
So there you go. If you want to contact us directly, you can contact Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. Again, Austin is our producer. He has his own podcast. So We Watch Movies podcast about how children should not leave Gatorade, full Gatorade bottles in freezers to get cold for days on end until they explode and make a mess everywhere.
There's no way that happened recently in Tom's life, because he was listening to the podcast and knew to look out for that.
That's right.
We watch movies.
The Gatorade exploding in the freezer, and
Saga.
The right amount of obscenities to yell, just loud enough so your children can't hear them. Probably.
Yep.
All right. Let's get into our listeners of the week. To thank our listeners of the week, first of all, to become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. There are now 3 ways to support the podcast. But way number 1, you go to www.avrant.com. Click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, where you can give us a PayPal donation. Those donations go to support, pay for hosting fees and stuff like that, and everything else. So we had a couple of donators this week. We have John and Jason to thank for the donations. So thank you, John. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, John, Jason, thank you so much for those donations.
We do appreciate it. And if you can't support the podcast financially, you can always do so in some other way. One of the ways you can do that now, or one of the ways that people have done that, is by telling manufacturers about us. So Dave bought an Integra Pre-Pro from Accessories for Less, and he let them know he heard about them from us. Chris offered to hook me up with a discount on a new phone. He works for Motorola and gave me a friends and family discount coupon code.
Yep.
So I haven't bought anything, but I'm looking into it. And Terry let SVS know that he bought a pair of Prime satellite speakers to use as a surround backs because of our recommendations. So thank you, Dave. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Terry.
Yeah, Dave, Chris, Terry, thanks for the support. Dave, Terry, congrats on your purchases. And Chris, very generous of you. Thank you for helping out Tom.
Yeah, and he's actually been sending me Rob-length emails about which phone would be best for me.
Oh, I see.
So if you have never received an email from Rob, imagine every email you got this week in one email. That's how Rob writes emails. And Chris has been very, very, very gracious. In fact, just today, I'm going to scroll over here. I got, let me see if I can, I'm scrolling up. These are all my emails from today. Scrolling down. Richard also independently recommended that Motorola would be a fine brand to get. So
okay, well there you go. It's kismet.
There you go, kismet right there. So I am looking into that, Chris. Thank you very much, and I may be making a purchase very soon if I can get the wife on board. It is my birthday this week, so we'll gonna try to shoehorn that into me getting a better phone. The last way to support the podcast is brand new. Last week, I threatened to actually get on this whole making a Patreon page, and I went, and right after the podcast, I did it. So we now have a Patreon page. It's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. It's all one word. So there, if you don't know what Patreon is, basically you can give us a salary.
Right.
It basically is what it comes down to.
It's a subscription. You can think of it as a subscription.
Right.
A voluntary subscription.
That's right. 100%
in the amount
voluntary.
that you choose.
Of any amount. I don't know. There may be a minimum of $1.
It appears to be $1 per month is the minimum, but I don't know. I to me, that seems kind of high, so maybe there's a way you can lower that. Like $1 a year sounds reasonable to me, but
everything's on a monthly basis, and then you get to donate $1 a month or more to the podcast, and then it will automatically deduct from whatever payment method, and then they pay us somehow.
So again, that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. That's the place to go. And I guess for the people who would prefer to give $1 a year, you can just still do that through the support AVRant podcast PayPal link.
That's right.
Then you can give $1 and that's it. See you next year.
Unrelated to anything I may have said earlier in the podcast, I think I have Gatorade in my eye, which is why I keep rubbing my eye. So I apologize to all the people watching this on YouTube, but I might be squinting throughout this podcast. So yes, we currently have 11 Patreons, and we are very thankful.
Yeah.
I am going to figure out how to redirect all that money to Rob and Austin, to be honest with you. But we'll see how it works out with if it starts balancing out with what's coming in on the other side. I got to make sure we have enough to pay for hosting fees. That's the only thing I really care about.
And on Patreon, we don't see individual names in that. So if you want a shout out so that, get your name, then you can just let us know, or you can still use the old PayPal version.
That's right.
Those ones, Tom sees the names.
I see the names
just so folks know why we aren't thanking Patreon donors by name. We don't see the names. We just know the number.
I'm sure it's in there someplace, but I haven't figured out how to find it. On top of that, there was somebody who posted our one message over there says, "Hey, your about page still says that you guys have a female co-host. Which one of you is the female?" So I vote Rob, but I think it might be me. So we're gonna have to update our about page. Other AVRant news, we've had for whatever reason, every once in a while, we decide we're going to do some interviews, and we don't do it very often, but we decided we're going to try to do some interviews now. So we have gotten an offer from a number of people to either they gave us suggestions of who we should talk to, or they said, you should talk to this person, and I know them, and I can get your name over to them. So one of the I sent an email out to RBH because I'd like to talk to them. I haven't had Shane Rich on here in a while. Shane has not responded to me yet. Right. So I will maybe email the marketing guy over there and see what's going on, because maybe Shane, I don't know.
Yeah, because RBH has had some pretty sizable lineup and product changes and stuff, so it'd be cool to talk to them about that.
We've also, I guess we're getting in touch with Brent Butterworth, who's the former editor-in-chief of Home Theater Magazine. So if you have any questions for Brent, you should send those to question@avrant.com. And if we can get this hooked up, there's no guarantees here.
Yeah,
okay,
nothing's set in stone at all.
Nothing at all, but we're in Communicado, I believe. You are in Communicado?
Yeah, well, so James Bujold, who's once in a while served as guest co-host on this podcast, he is friends with Brent. So he's like, I can talk to Brent, see if Brent wants to come on to the podcast and do an interview or something. So, what we're hoping to do by mentioning these ahead of time, and we've got one more that we're going to mention in just a moment, is, we are question and answer on this podcast, so if you have questions for RBH, if you have questions for Brent Butterworth, please send those. question@avrant.com. We'll hold on to those, and if and when we get these interviews set up, then we'll have questions to ask them from our listeners.
Lastly, we're going to try to speak to a rep from Surge X, which is
that one will probably happen.
Yeah, that's a power protection company. So that one's a little bit more sure. We'll see about RBH. I'd really like to talk to him again, but it's been a long time.
I think that it just might.
Well, I don't know.
Which
Shane
is good. We need to spread
there.
these out a little bit. So
yeah, we will have to spread them out a little bit. So,
but again, anything about power protection, Surge X in particular, or just in general, please send those question at avrant.com. We'll hold on to those. We'll ask the rep from SurgeX anything you'd like to know on that topic.
Right. All right, in the news. So more people are reporting successful Dolby Vision firmware updates for the 2016 Denon and Marantz AV receivers. Once again, Denon and Marantz UK websites have posted the latest info. The 2015 models, like Rob's Marantz SR7010, are now listed and confirmed for getting Dolby Vision HLG pass-through. But those older models won't be getting the update until 2018, is what they're saying.
Yep.
So there's that. Amazon and Google Play both dropped their prices on 4K movies to match Apple's, which is something that I don't think I can't remember the last time somebody had to drop their price to match Apple's price, but I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I guess miracles happen. Who knew? Somebody over at Apple right now lost their job. Guaranteed. When that was announced that everybody else was lowering their prices, Apple was like, wait a second. We undercut the market? Who made that decision? And that dude doesn't have a job anymore. Guaranteed. Amazon's new Fire TV supports 4K HDR10 and Dolby Atmos, but not Dolby Vision. It costs $70. And it's similar to a Chromecast in form factor, except it's a squarish dongle that hangs from an HDMI cable rather than a circular Chromecast-shaped one. So
here we have the new Apple TV 4K, which does 4K HDR10 Dolby Vision, but not Dolby Atmos.
Right.
And then Amazon comes along at half the or less than half the price and says, well, we can do 4K HDR10 and Dolby Atmos, but not Dolby Vision. So,
what are you gonna do? Because
nobody is willing to do everything we would like them to do for some reason.
Not yet. Give them some time. The Roku 44.3 will do it. Emotiva has added the XPA 9 Gen 3 and XPA 11 Gen 3 amplifiers to their lineup using their new stereo modules to increase the channel count in a single XPA Gen 3 chassis. Okay, so basically the way this thing works, so that if you don't know, they're just building one box. They're like, we're done with it. We're going to build one box, and you can put as many of these blades in there. And that's kind of what they look like. And they slide them in, and this is all digital, right? I'm not digital, but, switching amplifiers, right?
Well, the power supply is a switching power supply, but these are Class AB amplifiers.
Well, within them, okay.
So
how are they getting 300 watts out of these things, though? I'm a little confused because it doesn't. This power supply, I couldn't find a picture of the power supply inside the box. I found the picture of the blades and the back and the front and all that stuff. So they must have a huge power supply in there in order to get 300 watts out of it.
And it is this switching mode power supply. So it's altogether it's a Class H topology for the amplifier as a whole. So this switching mode power supply and then Class AB amplifiers.
Right. So
they're what they have now are these blades. So previously you could have up to 7 of these blades that were 300 watts apiece in this one chassis. Now they have a blade that has 2 channels on one blade. So you can have 5 of the 300 watt mono blades plus 2 of the 80 watts per channel stereo blades to give you 9 channels altogether, 5 at 300 watts, 4 at 80 watts apiece, or you can have 3 of the 300 watt mono blades and then 4 of the 80 watts per channel stereo blades to give you 11 channels total.
Right.
So that's what's going on there.
They're both $2,000. So
that's right.
That's how much they cost. So
the XPA 7, which was 7 of the 300 watt mono blades, that's $2,000. You can swap out 2 or 4 of those blades for now stereo blades, and it's still $2,000. So price didn't change.
Right. The question is, can you take one of the older ones and then swap out?
Not yourself.
Yeah,
they say very clearly that if you have an existing XPA Gen 3 amplifier, it can be changed, but you have to send it back to the factory for it to be done.
Oh, I'm sure that shipping will be cheap. They probably only weigh like 75 pounds. All right. I have never been a huge fan of that kind of amplifier topology. I think it's if anybody can do it right, I'm sure it's Emotiva, but I don't know. I don't know.
You like the big toroidal power supplies like ATI?
I do.
I like them too.
That's why
I went ATI.
I just trust them a little bit more. This. Not that I am of the opinion. You know me and receivers. I'm like just because it's got a bunch of moving parts doesn't mean it's going to break more often. But It's an amplifier, dude. I understand what Emotiv is doing, though. This makes perfect sense from a business standpoint.
It's more efficient. And
totally more efficient. All right. New for this week. Let's talk questions and answers. Let's start off with Tom. It's not me. Different guy.
Tom K.
Tom K. So he's got an update. We had advised Tom to wait for Cedia before deciding which projector to buy, so he wound up pre-ordering a brand new JVC RS540. So he's very excited and will let us know how he and his wife like it when it arrives in November. All right, great. That's great. Yay.
Yep.
All right. Tom's Theater is a dedicated enclosed 13 by 21 by 8 foot room. It's about 2,200 cubic feet. But for ventilation purposes, he has soffits on the two sides where air can escape into the unfinished area of his basement. He does not have any forced air coming into the theater room. Heating and cooling are provided by a split system. Mm-hmm. Those are kind of noisy sometimes, aren't they?
Well, I mean, they call that the ductless system,
yeah,
right? So
I
instead
know,
of a duct,
but they
you just
still
have
make noise. I mean, I've used those.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're not dead silent, but they don't have to be terribly loud.
Yeah. During the quiet part of the movie, you're going to hear it, I'm just going to say. But he has passive vents to allow fresh air to circulate, so that's about that. So when it comes to pressurizing his room with bass, what volume of air does he need to calculate? Is his combo of a SVS PC2000 and Elemental Designs 350W, is that the name of that? Is that really the name of it?
Yeah, it's just the 350W is the model name. I mean, you're not going to find it. Elemental Designs is out of business, so...
Yeah. So you ask if these two subs are up to the task, or it's possible he's never actually experienced full pressurization in his room because of the vents. Well, dude, everybody's got air vents of some sort.
Yeah.
You have something slightly different than what other rooms have, but every room has a way for air to get out and get in.
Yeah.
So what we're looking for is no massive openings that just allow air to super duper freely move throughout. And it doesn't sound like that's what you have here either. You just have, a vent to let,
yeah, these are some air vents. I mean, it's similar to, open your mouth wide and just go, and you can empty your lungs pretty quick versus, purse your lips really tightly. And it's going to take a while to empty your lungs. It's like same air capacity, but much smaller opening means it takes that much longer. And the pressure within your mouth will be higher with a small opening in your mouth versus a large opening. So it's a similar, it's not that this isn't anything close to the I have a open concept great room.
Right.
Where there's no wall or door between me and my kitchen and dining room. So, I mean, the air can just completely move freely. This is forcing whatever air movement is happening within this room into a small opening. I mean,
you are certainly pressurizing
speaking,
the
small.
space with these two subwoofers. I would have no doubt about that. And Rob, I just want to say, from a managerial standpoint, whenever you make an analogy about how things work, I would appreciate if you only use cars, because that's what I use.
It is what you use.
Vehicles of some sort. All right, none of this mouth open close crap. It is cars or nothing.
I'm trying to figure out how to make that one work.
I'm extremely tired. I got no sleep last night, so that's how this is going to go. This podcast is going to be that way. In case anybody's wondering, this is how we're doing it today. Tom's going to take out his Gatorade-flavored anger on Rob.
But for Tom K, yes, some of the pressurization in your room is escaping through the vents, but it shouldn't be enough to prevent you from feeling the bass in your room.
Absolutely. Damien says he's fairly new to home theater and home audio, but he's been listening and doing his best to research. Now he'd like some help with a subwoofer upgrade. Dude, we cannot help you. We don't really do subwoofers around here. Wrong.
What's
podcast.
A subwoofer?
Hey, subwoofers.
Well, wait a second. That was in the singular. That's why we're confused.
We are very confused.
There's no S on the end of that subwoofer.
We don't do subwoofer.
So what is that?
That is a confusing statement you have made. It's like grammatically incorrect, I'm pretty sure. Subwoofers are always plural. So his surround sound system is in his living room, and that living room is open to his dining room, kitchen, and a stairway. Living room itself measures roughly 2,800 cubic feet, but he isn't sure what the total cubic footage would be when including all the other spaces, so we're going to go with about infinity.
Cubic feet.
He's using the Pioneer Andrew Jones FS52 towers with the matching C22 center, and some unknown brand name of small towers that he got for free as his surrounds. He feels as though he made a mistake, though, because when he bought the Pioneer speakers, he figured he ought to buy the matching subwoofer from the same brand. Yes, that was incorrect. But he now knows that this is common for people who are new to home theater, but unfortunately the Pioneer SW8MK2, or Mark II, I suppose, subwoofer isn't getting the job done.
So, I mean,
no.
first of all, Damien, yes, you are absolutely in good company.
Oh, yeah.
When I bought when I started out, I had an RCA home theater in a box, so naturally that was the included, if you want to even call it, subwoofer. It was like a 6.5-inch woofer,
Right.
right? But it was its own separate box. And then when I upgraded to a Polk audio system, I bought a Polk subwoofer that went along with it because, yeah, it seems awfully logical, doesn't it? I mean, you're at the
Sure
store,
does.
here's everything in one brand. They're like, oh, they have a subwoofer too? You go, well, that would make sense.
I'll take
And he even said in his email, it's like, they blend nicely together. That's not the problem. It's just not playing as low, not playing as loud as he would like in his setting, which all makes sense.
All makes sense. I had a Frankenstein system, and I ended up buying a KLH downward firing like 6-inch subwoofer with a front port or something that was like $100, $99 from Amazon, and these glowing reviews. And we've all been there, dude. So don't feel bad.
Not at all.
So his wife is not opposing any of his equipment choices, but still doesn't want a huge subwoofer. Ideally, the new subwoofer will be smaller in size, so at least similar in size to the Pioneer. He has a limited budget, though, so $500 would be the absolute maximum, but he definitely preferred to spend less. And he does want to go with dual subs eventually, but that just isn't in the budget at the moment. I see.
All of it understandable.
So which subwoofer should he buy and why? He's been considering the BIC PL200, the RSL Speedwoofer 10S, and the HSU VTF1 Mark III, but he's open to other suggestions.
This is tough.
Okay, so this is your problem. Your room is ginormous.
Yeah.
And there is no... Okay, you can have a subwoofer that plays low. You can have a subwoofer that plays loud. Or these are three things you can have. Subwoofer that plays low, loud, and a subwoofer that's cheap. Okay? You can
also do you could put low and loud together.
Yeah.
Cheap and small.
Right. Cheap and small.
Because those are the things he's looking for. And you can pick two of those.
Two.
But you can't get all three.
You can't have small.
Really just no way
and
to get
cheap.
all three. Yeah, you
And
can get small and cheap.
And still have loud and low.
Yeah. So you can have small and cheap together, but it won't play loud and low, which is actually what you have right now.
You currently own that.
You already got that. It's small and it wasn't too expensive, but it doesn't play low enough and it doesn't play loud enough. You can get a sub that plays low and loud and is cheap, but then it's going to be big.
Yes.
Or you can get one that plays low and loud and it's small, but then it ain't going to be cheap.
No. And that would be your JL audios.
That's right.
You get a box that's a reasonable size and it can fill your space plus some and absolutely crush. But it's like $12,000. That's
doesn't have to be quite that much, but it's well over $1,000.
Yes.
Well over $1,000. Yeah.
So most of our options here, in all honesty, aren't going to be able to hit the low and loud enough to pressurize your space, which in all honesty you probably don't want anyways. You don't want your entire house pressurized with bass.
But you can certainly improve upon the SW8.
That is true. So the SW8
There's no question
is
you can improve upon that.
an 8-inch, I'm guessing an 8-inch
It
subwoofer, and I'm
8-inch, 100-watt,
Okay.
basically a 13-inch cube.
All right, so it probably doesn't play much below what, 35, something like that.
They
40?
even spec it at 38.
That is not surprising, but
they're being pretty honest.
I was going to say, it's not surprising that that's what it does. It is surprising that they said it.
Yeah. Well, it is Andrew Jones. He doesn't really lie about his specs, so I'll give him that.
So let's look at the two things that he's suggesting. The BIC PL200, I don't remember, but I don't remember it being something that I ever recommended for anything ever.
So it was basically a borrowed HSU design.
Okay.
So it was like an STF-1 back when that existed.
Okay.
Which is, I mean, it's not a bad sub by any means, but it's not really appropriate for your space.
Right.
That's the issue.
So the RSL Speedwoofer 10, so it's a 10-inch driver, what are we thinking?
10-inch driver, 350 watt, basically a 16-inch cube, plays down to about 24, 25 hertz.
That's quite a bit bigger than what he currently has. So we can go with around the 16-inch cube as being something he's okay with for now, and then maybe push it up a little bit.
Well, and he mentioned the HSU VTF-1, which is 19 by 15 by 17.
That's a
getting pretty
very big sub.
Yeah, that's getting pretty sizable.
That is a reason. That is crossed over from the 3 formula. You are now into large.
That's
because
right.
you have not. I guarantee you, sir, if you have not built the box, when you build the 19 by 15 by 17 inch box that you will need for the HSU, you will think that is an awfully large box.
Yes. So
but
let's
wait before we go on.
Yeah.
He may, because he's new, he may not have heard this. Whenever you buy a subwoofer online, the pictures never.
Yeah,
even
you
if
can't judge scale from the photos. Yeah.
Even if they have a person standing next to it,
right?
Even if you see a video of it in the room, you're gonna look at your own room and go, oh, yeah, if it's right there, it'll be just fine. No, take the dimensions. Get yourself some cardboard. Build yourself a cardboard box of those exact dimensions.
Yep.
I mean, at least within an inch or so, and
Yeah.
then stick it in your room and go, "Oh, that's going to be okay, I suppose." Or, "For the love of God, what have I done?" Because you want to do that now before you get this 75-pound subwoofer in your house.
We've had people tell us like they've even just held the tape measure up.
Yeah,
right?
that's
they
what I
take
did.
Tape measure, they hold it out, they're like, oh yeah, that'll fit, and then they get the actual box, and they're like, oh, like that. That's a filled volume of space. It's not lines, right? So,
that's exactly what I did. I held up the tape measure. I showed it to my wife. We were like, it's going to be about this big. It's a pretty big sub. We were looking at the EP500, which is probably about this, right? It's probably about it was 19 by 20 something, probably.
That's right. Yeah, it's in the VTF 1-ish size.
Yeah, and we held up the tape measure. We all went, yeah, that's pretty big. And I got it. I set it up and went, holy crap, that's a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be.
And it's funny because I have one of those, and it seems small compared to the other subs that I have.
Does now.
I'm like, oh, that's such a reasonable size. Other people are like, my God, the size of that subwoofer.
Right. But that's just physics. To overcome physics, you need a lot of horsepower, basically.
Displacement.
And that's where the money comes in. All right, so if you can go with the HSU VTF 1 Mark III, I'm guessing you were not that far off from an SVS PB 1000, which is probably going to be a very similar size, which makes me think that this sub is going to be, and that's about $500, isn't it? About $500.
Yeah. So the PB 1000 from SVS is exactly $500. Shipping is included. Although if your state charges tax, then I guess that would be on top of it. But the price difference between that and the HSU VTF 1 is very, very small. They're really quite comparable subs in size and output and everything. Yeah. But one reason we like SVS in particular for this application where you have a very large volume of air that you're trying to deal with is that the SVS subs are extremely well protected. Right. They're DSP controlled, they're digital signal processing controlled, so you can literally turn their volume dial as high as it will go without any worry of damaging the sub or even making it sound. It'll distort. It'll start to distort. I don't want to say there's no distortion.
But you won't hear it bottoming out or...
Yeah, not nearly as badly as most other subs would distort if you turn their volume dial literally as high as it goes. So in a situation like this where you're dealing with a very large volume of air, and now you're going to get a sub that actually can output down to 19 or 20 hertz, where you're going to start to want to really crank that volume up because like, hey, it's cool that I can even get that frequency, but you need a lot of pressurization, a lot of air movement to be able to hear that low. So that would be the reason to tell you to spend your entire $500 budget on a sub that is very likely larger than you want / expect it to be. But there's a reason to consider it. If you build the cardboard box and you're like, that's just too big, or you say spending all $500 is just more than I want to spend, then what? I mean...
because
the
HSU is probably a pretty good
but that's
option
barely any smaller and barely any cheaper.
Well, I was saying the BIC one that is basically the STF 1.
Yeah. It's tough. That one plays down to 32 hertz. So you went from 38 to 32.
Yeah, it's just not really good enough, man.
It's not really enough of an upgrade for me to get gung-ho about it,
Well, and I don't really...
would they go the Speedwoofer, I guess? Speedwoofer's kind of in between everything.
It is kind of in between.
And that's $100 less expensive. It's only a 16-inch cube instead of having 19-inch dimensions. Plays down to 24, 25 hertz. Yeah. It's a good entry-level sub.
Let me put you this way. if money is really that much of an issue, if it's really that much of an issue, you can feel good about the RSL purchase.
Yeah.
You will also spend the rest of your life wondering what if. I say that as somebody who has absolutely done that purchase hundreds of times across my life, where I'm like, this is what I want, but I'm going to get this one because it's a little bit cheaper.
Right.
And it does most of what I want anyways. That's what I'm doing right now with these phones. You know, I'm looking at the Motorola stuff. I'm like, you know, this one's basically does everything I want, but this one, you know, it's got all the good stuff, right? And I'm trying to figure out how much it's worth to me, and to my family, because this is money.
I wanted to mention that Monoprice's brand new Monolith 10-inch subwoofer, which actually won't be shipping until November.
Okay.
But that is also out there. It's actually, so it's $500 as well, although Monoprice charges shipping. So the total price will be over $500. But it's even bigger than the SVS PB1000, like only by about an inch or so in each dimension. But it's even bigger for around the same price. So, but I want to mention that it's out there. But honestly, here's where we're coming at. We're going to tell you that if the size is okay and you're okay with spending all $500, then the PB1000 from SVS is where we're going to point you most likely. Yes. Because performance-wise, we think that's about as good as you can do for this amount of money. But we would understand if it's simply too physically large because it's big, or you just don't want to spend that much, in which case I would go RSL Speedwoofer 10S would be my second choice. You're giving up some stuff, but it makes it a bit smaller and it makes it a bit cheaper.
Yeah. Carl says AMC Theaters has come on board as an investor and venue partner in Dreamscape Immersive. Did they not see the movie Dreamscape?
I didn't.
Dreamscape, isn't that the name of that movie? It may have been before your time, Rob. It was with what's his name? It's going to drive me. But it was when you could jump in people's dreams and affect their dreams and stuff like that. And he's just okay. No, I don't know.
I don't know it.
Anyways, it's a virtual reality company with some big names backing it, including Steven Spielberg, Hans Zimmer, Gore Verbinski, producer Walter Parks, and Disney Imagineer Bruce Vaughn. Okay, so AMC is now on board as well. And Dreamscape has up to 6 people put on VR goggles, gloves, and shoe sensors, and then those 6 people can interact with each other's avatars in a shared virtual reality. Experiences are meant to last about 10 minutes and cost about $15 to $20 a pop. The goal is to spend about $2 million to produce each experience, which will put those 6 participants into various movie franchises from their studio partners, Fox, MGM, and Warner Brothers. So what do we think of this take on VR? Do we think having these set up at existing AMC movie theaters or dedicated venues close by will attract customers and be an effective marketing tool for new movies? Is it really a marketing tool? Is that what the idea here is? I thought the idea is
because it's tying it into existing movie franchises. So this is like a side experience for you to enjoy that ties into an upcoming movie or an existing movie. You know, put yourself in the movie type of thing. But it's not. I
don't see how this is going to make any money. Now, if they're looking at this from a standpoint of, you know, this is going to get more people to go watch the movie, then maybe. But I mean, okay. AMC basically said in the article, hey, we've got space that, you know, we're not really doing anything with. What do they mean? Well, I mean, they've got movies that nobody's going to see, but they have to show something because they don't want the thing to be empty. They want to try to make as much money as they can. They could take those spaces and convert them into these things. But with 6 people at a time for 10 minutes, and you got to think about whatever the switch out time is between those things.
Yeah, well, especially with all this, right? It's gloves and sensors that go on your shoes, plus putting the goggles on.
So what I thought was this. Let me think of my thought process was this. Think about the height of a movie theater.
Yeah.
If you went in there,
adapting a full movie theater. I think they're talking about like where the arcade games used to be.
Oh, it can't be. It's got to be bigger than that. Did you see the pictures of the room they were doing that thing in?
I don't know.
It was pretty big. I think they're going to take one of their movie theaters. I think if they add a second level to it, because it doesn't have to be tall, right? So that you can basically have 2 groups going at once.
At least.
And then you would maybe 4 groups going at once, and then you could, you would have groups waiting by. They would come out one door, the next group would come in. So basically, you're doing 5 an hour. We'll say 5 an hour at $20 a pop, six $120 times 5 times 4 times however many hours they're open. If they can fill it all the time, there's a waiting list and all of that. I still don't see how it's going to make money. I mean, not when they can sell. I mean, you think, well, you know what? If you think about it, how much? Yeah, I mean, a movie theater that is full, they're getting how many thousands of dollars for those tickets alone, not anything else. I don't see how they're making money on this. Do I think it sounds awesome? Oh yeah. Do I want to? Oh yeah, I think it sounds awesome. I want to do it. I want to do it right now. I do it right now. Let's go. I'd do it for sure. It sounds amazing. It might suck. I'd do it once though. Just like 3D.
Yeah, I'm just worried about the logistics. That's my only, like, the very first time I ever experienced virtual reality. Gosh, what was I, about maybe 10 or 11 years old or something like that? It was like, the early version where like it was literally like the early LCD displays mounted in the goggles. The resolution was horrible. Everything was like terrible looking. The head-mounted displays were exceedingly heavy. But you actually did interact with the other people who were sharing the experience. I've never done that. And it was like we have a thing that we call the P&E, the Pacific National Exhibition, or Playland, during the rest of the year, and that's where they showed it. And then it was there for like 2 years in a row, and then it disappeared until now. Right. That was the end. That was the beginning and the end of virtual reality. And my experience with it.
When I was in college and even younger, there was a place in San Francisco I used to go to that had VR, but it was ridiculously expensive, and it was more like a mech thing. You would sit in it, and the screens were all around you and all of that. They didn't really seem all that VR-y to me.
Yeah, the ones I had, like, you actually had sort of a gun, and you were playing like a competitive game with the other people who were in the world, and you were shooting at them with a little, like, it was almost like a grenade launcher type of gun, and the graphics were like, you remember back to like the original Star Fox? Or Virtua Fighter. It was like that level of polygon graphics.
Right. I think when the first VR thing I ever had was still wireframes.
Yeah.
No,
this was like wireframe with like one
shade
texture. Yeah, like it was a shader. Yeah, it wasn't even a texture. That was a shader. So,
I like the idea, man. I do. I think it could be interesting.
I'm just worried about the logistics. It's so much stuff to put on each person.
I don't care about logistics. They have phones now. The Google Goggle.
Oh, I know.
Whatever they call it.
I mean, if they make the headset similar to the PlayStation VR, I hope it is too, because otherwise people have to take their glasses off and focus, and you don't want the ski mask type goggles that are hard to adjust. Make sure it's like PlayStation VR style goggles, because those are pretty easy to slip on and off, and you don't have to take your eyeglasses off if you wear them. But then you got to put the gloves on. Someone has to put the shoe sensors on. Walking around the space, man, I don't know. I worry about it. It'd be fun, but it's also like $15 or $20 for 10 minutes of that.
Yeah, that would probably
play online in PlayStation VR instead.
That would probably be the thing that would stop me.
Yeah,
the $20, $15 for 10 minutes. I have a real hard time swallowing that pill, because I am at heart extremely cheap. Right. I do not want to spend money on, unless it's going to be awesome.
Yeah,
I would probably do it once. I would probably find a way to justify doing it once. We're like, oh, we're here. It's your birthday. Let's all just do it. And
but it also brings to mind like all the people who have bought an Oculus Rift or the Vive or PlayStation VR. Like, would you release these experiences? Is this something? Could I pay $15 or $20 and download this for my PlayStation VR and do it at home? That doesn't seem to be the goal.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 6 people interacting.
It's supposed to be the interactivity, right? Yeah. I don't know. I'm not super gung ho about it.
Yeah. Whatever.
That's me. By the way, Dreamscape 1984 starring Dennis Quaid.
Dennis Quaid. That's the one I was thinking of. And then the bad guy in that is the bad guy. Whenever he shows up in the movie, you're like, that's the bad dude. He's always the bad guy. And his name in that movie was Tommy, which always bothered me. But, I mean, I used to love that movie when I was a kid. It scared me because I was very young. In 1984, I was 13, 12, something like that. So anyways, I love that movie. All right. Dave on Twitter. Dave asks a couple of questions. First, what is the purpose of the RS-232 port on the back of some receivers? Mm-hmm. Oh, Dave, that is not for you. Don't touch it. What it is a control port, and custom installers.
Old control port.
Yeah, I don't even know who. People still use it, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, for Crestron, for AMX.
So what basically happens is you can plug devices or your computer into this port and use and send commands directly to the receiver to do certain things that are much more granular than what you can do through a remote. You can go straight in and change some settings here and there. And Crestron, AMX, probably Control 4, and all the rest of them.
Control 4, yeah.
They will.
Although I think Control 4 does it mostly through Ethernet IP stuff.
Probably does. I don't know why
you do it that way too now.
So what it is just a way to integrate your receiver into a whole house automation system that uses a specific port in order so that everything has the same controls on it. It's just back there. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, you'll notice that like in Denon's lineup, they had the CI, right? Mm-hmm. They would put CI on the end of model numbers, and that stood for custom integrator or custom integration model, and those ones always had the RS-232 port on the back so that you could connect it to your Crestron system.
Yeah. Secondly, he asked, what about the 3.5 millimeter remote in and out jacks? What are they for? Same sort of thing, except you're using a remote control like your Harmony. Rather than pointing the IR at it, you could take a jack out of the back of whatever hub or whatever you're doing, plug it directly in a line directly into there, and it will control it. And then the out is to go out to other devices as well. Yeah. So
yeah, it's a relay, particularly for when you have equipment that's out of the line of sight of your infrared remote. So if you have these remote in and out jacks, as long as you have one device that is within the line of sight of your infrared remote, then it can relay the infrared commands to any other devices that have these remote in and out jacks. It's just a mono 3.5 millimeter cable. That's all it is. Very, very simple thing. Same cable as the trigger jacks.
I was going to say, I was just about to say it. When you email us back about the trigger jacks, those those are the same sort of thing. It basically says, hey, the receiver's on. Whatever's on the other end of this, you can turn on as well. And it's usually an amplifier. So what we use those for.
So. Oh, but sometimes it's a drop-down motorized screen, right?
You can use it for that as well.
When you turn this on, here's a trigger signal to... I mean, the trigger is just, it's here or it isn't. It's binary, it's on-off. Whereas the remote in and out is actually relaying full infrared commands.
That's right. Jeremy has a Marantz AV7702 Mark II Pre-Pro configured for a 7.2.4 Atmos setup in his living room. It's open to the rest of the house, so it's a large open space. His seats are roughly 12 feet from the screen, and he rarely goes louder than -10 dB on the master volume dial. His amplifiers are all Emotiva. He has one 5-channel amp and two 3-channel amps, all from the XPA series. His front LCR speakers are all 4 ohms. His backs, surrounds and backs are 6 ohms. And his overheads are 8 ohms. And he's very happy with the sound. But he wants Dolby Vision, and he wants it right now. So he knows he could wait for his Marantz to get updated, but Marantz says 2018 for his model, and he doesn't want to wait that long. So...
yeah, we mentioned that in the news, and that is true. The AV7702 Mark II. So going way back, I said there's no reason that model can't be updated to support Dolby Vision. Then they released the thing saying the AV7703 was going to get an update, but they didn't mention the 7702 Mark II, and we were like, crap, maybe the 2015 models aren't going to get it at all, only the 2016 and 2017 models are. And now they have the new information saying, oh no, the AV7702 Mark II will get the update, just... not until 2018. The 7703 got it, just now.
There you go.
So, yes.
So he says he could buy a new AV7704 or a refurbished AV7703. The 7704 comes with Dolby Vision support out of the box, and 7703, as Rob just mentioned, just got the upgrade. So everything else would just stay the same.
Yeah, he'd keep all his amps and just swap out his one Pre-Pro for a newer version of the Pre-Pro.
So second, he says he could sell his 7702 and all of his Emotiva amps and just go with 11-channel Denon X6400H or X6300H receiver.
Yeah, those are AV receivers that have 11 amplifiers built into its one chassis.
Or he could replace his AV7702 Mark II with a Denon X44 or X4300 and keep all of his amps, or he could sell one or two of his amps and use a mix of external and internal amplification. So he says his budget is fairly flexible, but of course he'd appreciate getting good value. He definitely does not want to notice any sort of downgrade in his sound quality. What do we think the best way to come at this is? What will we do out of these three? I know what I would do, and
As do I.
I don't know that I think that you would be happy with what I would do, but I'll tell you what I would do. I would not buy a brand new or a refurbished 7703. That would be my second choice. A 7704 would not even be on the table for me. The refurbished 7703, which does everything you want and is going to be significantly cheaper, would be option B for me.
Okay. So that's keeping all of his amps, getting a new pre-pro to replace his 7702 Mark II, but you'd go with the one model year up and a refurbished version of that from Accessories for Less so that the price stays down.
That's what I would do. And I believe that's what he wants me to tell him to do.
Okay.
That's what I believe. Okay. That being said, I would probably go with an X4300H from Accessories for Less, which will get the update if it doesn't have it already.
It already has it.
I would keep the 5-channel amps to power the front and the front three and the surround speakers, and I would use the internal amps to power the rest, and I would call it a day. That's what I would do. I would sell
that
the
is
rest.
Exactly the same thing I would do, Tom.
Shocking. But that
It's
is
the exact same.
those two 3-channel amps would pay for this whole kit and caboodle, I think.
Well, plus he's selling the 7702 Mark II pre-pro
That's
as
right.
well.
That's
right.
right.
going to fetch some money.
But I think he wants us to say get the 7703 because I think he wants all the amps. I don't want to notice a downgrade in sound quality.
But that's just it. You won't.
I think he will, but I don't know that it'll actually be there.
Really? So
you know what I'm saying?
Here's where we're coming at it from. We're looking at the AV receiver as just a processor.
Yes.
Right? Well, that's how we're viewing it. And for all the things he wants to do, the X4300H, which is an AV receiver, it has 9 amplifiers built in, it can process 11 speakers, but it has all the processing that he would want. It still has Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 with sub-EQ HT, so it's got the highest level of Odyssey for room correction. It got the Dolby Vision and HLG pass-through firmware update. People have sent us the pictures that they just did it. So it's got the Dolby Vision right now. It processes the 7.2.4 Atmos configuration that he wants to run, and it does it all for, if you get the refurbished version from Accessories for Less, for $700, which is by far the least expensive price. So we're saying you get all the processing you need for the lowest price possible. Then it does have these 9 amplifiers built in. So he wants to run 7.2.4. He has 11 speakers. He must have at least 2 channels of external amplification. That is necessary if he does this. But he already owns 11 channels of external amplification, so we know he already has it.
Right.
And what we're saying is keep the 5-channel one. He's got 1 5-channel and 2 3-channel amps. We're saying keep the 1 5-channel because you got these 4-ohm front, left, center, and right speakers. And I'm like, yeah, you could use external amplification for that. I think that's a good idea. It's the same amp you're already using, so you're not going to notice any difference in sound. And then might as well keep the 5-channel one and still power your surround speakers. Now you have to power 6 speakers with the X4300H. But we're talking about powering your surround backs and your 4 overhead speakers.
The speakers that do the least amount of work probably out of any speaker in here. And none of them are going to require all that much power. So
yeah, they're
even if
physically closer to you than your front, left, center, and right. They don't get used nearly as often.
They don't get nearly as loud most of the time. So
and you're far less critical
of
the sound because they're behind you and above you where we don't hear too so good, us humans.
we don't hear too so good, yeah.
No, we're not very good at hearing from those locations. So powering those 6 positions with the X4300H's built-in amplifiers, I have zero there. If you could honestly, in a blind comparison, genuinely tell them apart,
not a chance.
Not a chance.
So, to Rob's point that we can't hear that well behind us, you guys probably remember last podcast I was talking about how I wasn't sure if my height speakers were working because I didn't know if that light was supposed to turn green on the amplifier, and it never does. It just stays red. So after the last podcast, I went through and did the test tones. And they're working. They're working.
Oh, good.
And as it went around the room, because my two surround back speakers are pretty close to each other, and they're directly behind me, of course, as they're supposed to be, I could not tell which one was playing unless I turned my head to the side so I could get my ear so I could localize it a little bit.
Yeah. You get some better triangulation separation between your ears there. Yeah.
So, there is zero chance. I mean, even if these were hard to drive speakers that you were using for surround backs,
these are his 8-ohm speakers in these positions.
I know,
as
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying even if they were the 4-ohm speakers, there would be zero problem with your receiver powering these things. Zero problem. So
this check, it does everything you want your system to do for the least amount of. In fact, you're going to make a profit on this. If you sell 2 Emotiva 3-channel amps and your AV7702 Mark II, you're going to get back more than $700, the cost of the X4300H. So you're going to come away with the new processor that does everything you want to do and money in your pocket. Right. That's the solution, in my view.
He says the very newest models mention having the newest HDMI standards and being upgradable to features like EARC. He has a long 40-foot HDMI cable run, so a strong HDMI connection is a priority for him. He's also a gamer, so the variable adaptive frame rate feature, which Xbox One X will supposedly support, would be an attractive thing to him. Are those considerations enough to warrant paying more for one of the newest receiver or pre-pro models? The 40-foot cable run, there's nothing that's going to be inside your receiver that's going to make that work if it don't work.
Right.
So if the cable that you've already got isn't going to end up supporting this, I don't care how new your receiver is. It's not, the cable just doesn't, it's going to fail. So that's not really a consideration. Now, features like EARC and whatever this adaptive frame rate
adaptive frame rate, yeah.
I mean, do we know? Is that going to take HDMI 2.2 or
2.1?
2.1, I mean, or
so yeah. I mean, those were features that are mentioned in the HDMI 2.1 specification, but they don't really require. Like, they certainly don't require the 48 gigabits per second of bandwidth.
Right.
So it has been talked about that features like that could be added to existing HDMI chipsets. It's just a matter of writing the firmware to do it. They've already confirmed enhanced audio return channel, but I mean, I'm struggling to come up with the scenario where that's going to be useful to you. I mean, the only one I can really come up with is if your television's built-in streaming apps start to support lossless audio, because we're not even talking about Dolby Atmos in the form of Dolby Digital Plus with Atmos extensions, which is what you're getting right now if you're listening to Atmos from Netflix or Vudu or Amazon Prime Video or any of the streaming services that are giving Atmos right now. They're doing it in a lossy form using Dolby Digital Plus.
Yeah.
And LG's OLED TVs already output that from regular audio return channel. They don't need the enhanced audio return channel because enhanced audio return channel is for the lossless version. It's for the Dolby True HD version.
Right.
So I'm struggling to see where that's actually important. Tom's absolutely right. The cable that's up to the cable, not up to whatever ports you're connecting it to, really.
Yeah.
And we don't know about the variable adaptive frame rate thing. That hasn't been talked about in AV receivers. It hasn't been mentioned. Is it possible it could be added? Yes, but we really haven't heard anything about it. So, plus, if you're only paying $700 now, by the time that feature does arrive, you could just upgrade again.
You could do it $700 again.
That's right.
Get the one that you're looking at right now. All right, so he says there's a wrinkle here. All right. His local Best Buy seemingly had a pricing error in their system, and a brand new Denon AVR X6400H was scanning at the price of $14.99 instead of $21.99.
Yeah.
He snagged one, but he hasn't opened it yet.
Yeah.
So now what should he do? Obviously, one option is to keep it and use it. He could try different amp configurations to figure out how many of his Emotiva amps he could sell along with his old processor. But he could also turn around and flip the brand new unopened X6400H for a profit. So how should he proceed?
Yeah, that's tough.
Well, let me tell you this right here. Okay. there's two thoughts I have here. First, I don't know the kind of person that would buy an unopened X6400 H from somebody online or out of the back of a truck. You know what I mean?
You kidding me? Just on eBay.
On eBay, you think you can get that? I don't know.
Absolutely.
So you think you can get more than $1,500? That's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
I would probably sell it if I were you. All right. I'd probably try to get rid of it and then make some money off of it and then put that money towards the other thing that we said. But I kind of think that you're probably going to want to keep it. And I think it's probably too late and you already opened it. That's what I think. I think by the time that I have answered this question and you have heard this podcast, there is a new Denon X6400H sitting on your equipment rack. And you know what? That's fine. You got a good deal.
It does give you the opportunity to literally just try powering all 11 of your speakers using just the 6400H and then plugging in one of your 3-channel amps to power your front, left, center, right, while the 6400H powers all the other speakers.
Yeah.
And you just keep adding the external amps that you already own to see, okay, where is the dividing line? Where do I no longer hear an improvement to the sound? And then you would know for certain. At the same time, you've spent more than double the cost of the X4300H getting this. But he said his budget was flexible. It's not super cut and dry to me.
Yeah, I think he's already opened it.
Because I mean, there's a whole point. This really is the latest and greatest. He got it for a steal. Like that does need to be a pricing error. Nobody's selling it for $1,500 brand new right now. Not that model. So there's the kind of I got away with a steal. There's the pride of ownership of it's the brand newest thing. And it's the I for certain know how many external amps I genuinely need in order to actually hear any sort of difference thing going on there. But
I think
you use the extra $800 in your pocket?
That's what I'm saying. It's going to be more than that. The smart play is to sell it and make a profit on it plus buy the 4300. If you did not do that,
that's the pure logic approach. No emotion, just logic.
If you did not do that, I do not blame you because I think I'd be very, very tempted to just.
I know. No, I mean me in this situation, I'd be like, well, there's a brand new 6400H with its gold-plated connectors on the back there and 11 amp channels built in. I'm not going to use all of them, but there they are. Hey. Has Oro 3D. I don't have to pay $200. See, if you wanted Oro 3D on the X4300H, you have to pay an extra $200 on top. 6400H has Oro 3D out of the box. I mean, hey.
No one wants that. No one wants that, Rob.
But it's already there.
No one wants it. No one wants that. Michael is very excited. He has a pair of KEF LS50 and a pair of Ascend Sierra 2 speakers that he's auditioning and comparing. That's exciting. Mm-hmm. So finding just the right placement and toe-in, etc., seems a bit tricky. How can he make sure the speakers are positioned optimally so he's giving both pairs a truly fair shake? So this the age-old question of how to set up a comparison. Now let's take this to the illogical extreme. If you want to really do it right, you'll put both those bad boys on the same Lazy Susan with the, and then just rotate them back and forth. You know, being able to switch those in the exact same location. I have done lots of speaker shootout comparisons. Okay, lots, and there are times when your room makes such a difference that you need to be very cognizant. Most of the time, though, you just kind of stagger them. Essentially, you put one. If the speaker's on the left, if one speaker's on the left on the left side, make sure that same speaker's on the left on the right side, so that the one's on the inside, one's on the outside for both of them. Yeah,
the pattern is ABAB.
Yeah. So
rather than ABBA, right? You don't do ABBA, do ABAB.
Usually that's enough. And yes, you do have to play with toe-in, and you could switch so that you do ABAB, and then after you do a couple of comparisons, you switch the speakers and you do BABA, so that you whatever. But you moving them is going to make more of a difference than about anything else. So what you really want to do, what you really want to strive to do, is in their respective locations, is get those speakers sound just about as good as you can.
Right.
That's the hard part.
Yes. Now, how do we do that? Right.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, I actually think that's closer to what he's asking is how do you get it so that they're sounding as good as they can so that you're like, this is the fairest shake I can give these two different pairs of speakers when I'm comparing them. This one is sounding as good as it can sound, and this other one is sounding as good as it can sound. How do we achieve that?
Right. So it's not easy. But the first thing you want to do is you want to start with level matching them. Right. So you level match with one set of speakers and you level match the other set of speakers. And if the level matching is different, the easiest way to do that is through an amplifier. I mean, can you level match different speakers with an AB, the AB buttons? You can't, right? On
that's a little tricky. You can usually do it with Zone 2, though.
Right, Zone 2.
Because you can have different volume levels for the main zone and for Zone 2.
That's right.
So usually if you have Zone 2, you can set that up. Make that
the way I've done it in the past is I just use external amplification for both of them.
Right.
And then I turn one amp on and the other amp off when I'm switching them.
Yeah.
Essentially, and then they power off and on, and it's no big deal. That's the easiest, one of the easiest. And those amps have to have volume control, though. If they don't have a volume control, it doesn't work because if they're just straight amps, they'll just whatever the trim level is what you get.
Yeah, yeah.
But what Rob's saying is right. Zone 2, you can set one in through Zone 1 and one in through Zone 2. The Zone 2 has to have its own amplifier. And
yes, yep.
That's going to be
but a lot of AV receivers, they let you, say, assign the surround back binding posts as your Zone 2 output, and you can do it that way.
Yeah. So once you've got them both level matched, then it's a matter of switching back and forth between the two as quickly as possible. So if you can do it within 3 seconds, that's optimal. But if there are massive differences between the two, and honestly, I believe the Kefs and the Senda Sierra 2s are going to sound different enough that you're going to be able to hear it pretty easily. And I don't mean differently like one's good and one's bad. They're just going to sound different.
Like blindfolded, you would be able to identify that one is different from the other.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then it's going to be a matter of just switching back and forth and figuring out which one you like more.
Yeah.
That's it.
There's a little bit more that I want to... the toe-in stuff, yeah.
All right, so toe-in is another whole thing. The way I do this, and everybody does it slightly differently, and Rob will give you his way, I set the speakers so they're facing directly straight out, and I play a song. And then I turn the speakers so that they are facing directly at me, maybe during the song, and they're facing directly at my seat, and I listen to that song. And then I start to adjust them out. Now, if I find that that straight out and directly at me sounds exactly the same, that means they have very good off-axis response, which means it doesn't make a difference where you put them. Really, that has happened to me before. I have.
There are some speakers like that for sure
that have such even off-axis response that you're like, whatever, dude, just face them straight out. They're fine. Yeah. Other speakers are much more finicky, as he says. So, and I would imagine the Sens would be like that. Rob will tell you more in a second. So, what I would do is then face them towards me, listen to them then, and then I start to cheat them out until the stereo image in the center is very, very solid, and I get as wide a sound stage as I possibly can. And then I stop right there. That's pretty much it.
So I do almost a reverse of that, because rather than me keeping my listening position static and little by little adjusting the toe in of the speakers, I like to get right up close. This is me. I move right up close to my speaker. Just one speaker alone, in mono for the moment. And usually I'm just playing pink noise out of that one speaker. But I get right up close to it, myself within a foot of it, and I'm looking for what I would call like the cone of dispersion. What I'm saying is, let's say you start with yourself directly in front of the speaker, and it's playing pink noise. You move yourself over to the left, over to the right, up, down, and you'll be able to find a cone shape where the sound of that pink noise, for the most part, for the vast majority, the timbre doesn't change. The tone of the pink noise doesn't change. Within a certain latitude to the left and right, certain up and down, you end up with this cone. And then outside of that cone, you notice that the timbre changes, sometimes gradually, sometimes very abruptly. Sometimes it's almost like there's an invisible border where you go past that border and the sound completely changes tone. And then other speakers, it's a very gradual shift. But I'm trying to discover that cone. And one of the reasons I like to do it that way is you can't always assume the optimal height of the speaker. Most speakers, you want your ear to be at the same height as the tweeter.
Right.
That's most of the time, but it's not all of the time. We had a great example with Ted when he got his Legacy Audio speakers. He talked to Legacy Audio, and they're like, we actually designed these speakers to have their audio center more or less where the woofer is rather than where the tweeter is. So the place where it sounds the most even on axis is with the tweeter above your ear level or below your ear level, with your ear being more or less in line with the woofer. So that could be the case. And if you get yourself up close to that, you can discover that. So you're not necessarily saying, here's what it sounds like when I'm dead ahead of the tweeter and I'm only looking for the sound that's similar to that. It's finding the cone, wherever that cone may be, where the sound is even and uniform as long as you remain within that cone of dispersion. And then once you know that, you simply aim that cone to cover your seat. And now you're within that cone as the listener. So I do it almost in a reverse fashion, but we're both looking for the same thing ultimately. We're both looking for the same end result, which is that here is where the sound is uniform, creating the sweet spot at the listening position.
Sometimes I find that speakers, within that cone will have, especially like directly on axis, when it's
Right.
when it's the tweeter isn't meant to be listened to directly on axis.
Straight ahead. I mean, HSU speakers would be a great example of that. They even tell you in their manual, we don't intend for you to listen to these on axis.
So
that would be a bad
that's
starting
why I
point.
do it kind of the way I do it,
Yep.
where I want to hear straightforward, which is probably not the way they're meant to be, and then straight at me, which is probably not the way they're meant to be.
Right.
And then I can kind of judge how good or bad it gets from there. Rob's way is perfectly valid too. I don't know that I want to listen to Pink Noise, but that's Rob. That's what Rob does. Rob does Rob. That's the way that works. So
that's right.
I think other than that and switching back and level matching and switching back and forth, I don't know that we have any more tips for you. He does ask about other tips. The best way, you need a good selection of music that you're very familiar with. So what I mean by good selection is it can't just be ZZ Top.
Right.
I mean, if you literally only listen to ZZ Top on your system,
I suppose,
that would be fine. But if you don't, then you need to have a good selection, which means you need to have some stuff with some low end, some stuff with some real high end, some quiet stuff, some loud stuff. You need to listen to a good variety, and preferably of the best recordings you can get your hands on. You don't want to be listening to 128 kilobit a second, whatever, MP3s.
Right.
That's gonna not sound that great.
Don't judge it by our podcast. Our 64 kilobit per second MP3.
I don't think
people
it's
talking.
64. I think it's 96. I think it might be.
Oh, it was 64 when I downloaded your previous one.
Could very well be 64 then. Because
for two people talking,
what do you need? Yeah, exactly.
You don't really need much,
So
but don't use that. Don't use that as your test material to evaluate speakers.
You should
That's
definitely listen to the podcast though, but don't listen to it.
But not as your evaluation material.
But so we could tell you some of our favorite songs that we use, but if you've never heard them before, it doesn't do you any good. So you need to think about some of the music that you first of all listen to all the time. And then think about whether or not it's actually good music to listen to on a good system. Because I'll tell you, some of the stuff I like listening to in the car absolutely does not work in my home theater.
It's 3 chords over and over. Not a lot of variety. Yeah.
And it's completely compressed, dynamic range compression. It's not the best. Some of them are downloaded from iTunes or whatever, not the best downloads. They sound great in the car. You put them in here,
that's right.
Oh, not so bueno. So make sure you've got some good recordings.
I have a couple of tips though.
What else you got?
On that low end side of things, that's one thing where I think you can get into a lot of trouble doing a comparison, because the bass coming from these are both bookshelf type speakers,
right?
And the bass coming from those, there can be such differences, and these can be position dependent, that it can override or mask a lot of other details sometimes.
That's true.
And what you should be doing, hopefully, is crossing over whatever ones you decide to keep, crossing them over to a pair of subwoofers. That's what we would hope you're doing, even if it's a dedicated 2-channel music-only system. We here at AVRant are still going to hope that you're crossing your speakers over to a pair of subwoofers. And in Michael's case, I believe he is.
Yeah.
So that means if you're just evaluating the speakers, I would say, and I'm not saying don't listen to them full range. By all means, listen to them full range. See what they can do in that regard, but realize that what you're hearing in the bass is mostly to do with your room and less to do with the speakers. But I suggest at some point setting yourself like a high crossover. I'm talking like a 200 or a 250 hertz crossover, so that you're essentially eliminating the bass and compare the speakers that way as well. Because very often you'll notice differences in the mid-range and treble that you don't notice when the speakers are producing bass, because the bass masks so much of the difference that's going on in the mid-range and treble that your brain just doesn't notice it. So I'm not saying that this is how you're going to listen to your music or anything. I'm just saying this is a way to potentially reveal some differences that are there the entire time, but you don't always notice because the bass can be so overwhelming.
Yeah, you gotta really. That Rob makes a good point. Worrying about the bass and hearing people like, these bookshelves dip down to 40 hertz. Well, who cares? I don't care.
Yeah.
What is that?
Because it's not going to be even at your seat.
I'm never going to listen to him that way. Right. So a lot of times what I will do is listen to him full range for a while. What Rob's saying is valid, but at the very least cross him over at 80 into nothing.
Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Don't put a subwoofer in there.
Oh yeah. I forgot to mention when I'm saying set this high crossover, don't have the subwoofer. Yeah. Just like what I'm saying is try and get rid of a bunch of bass.
Yeah.
So that now all of a sudden you're able to clearly hear the mid-range and treble. And I mean, I'm trying to think of a time when I didn't notice a difference in the mid-range and treble that I did not notice when the bass was present.
Yeah.
It reveals this stuff that is otherwise masked.
Yeah.
So I find that very useful. The last thing I will say is the level matching is really, really important, because otherwise we just tend to favor whichever speaker is louder.
That's true.
Assuming they're not of vastly different quality levels, which these ones aren't, you tend to favor whichever is louder. However, I will say this. When you have very different dispersion from speakers, like let's say one is an electrostatic, basically a beam of sound, and the other is a bipole that fires in both directions and is super diffuse, right? Mm-hmm. The total sound power coming out of those two speakers can be very different, right? What registers on your SPL meter might be the same, but the actual amount of sound power being sent out into the room can be different. So if you did the 72 measurement spinorama in an anechoic chamber, they'd look very different even though they measure the same on an SPL meter. So to me, part of a fair comparison is going, okay, on this song right now, I'm preferring speaker pair A over speaker pair B. But what happens if I just turn up the volume level on speaker pair B by 2 dB, 3 dB? Not a large amount, but I just turn up the volume a little bit. Do I now all of a sudden prefer speaker pair B? Because maybe it's just a volume difference. Maybe that's the only thing making me prefer speaker pair A right now. So that's not like the super objective way to do it, but it's a more subjectively fair way in my mind, because that way you're saying, now I'm sure if I turn up speaker pair B and I still prefer speaker pair A, I go, okay, I prefer speaker pair A in this instance. But to me, that's part of the fair comparison, is making sure it's not just a volume difference making you think that.
Yeah. So what you really want to do is just test these things kind of by themselves, full range, truncated, and then at the very end, you can start adding your subwoofer just to see how
see
things
what
are,
blends nicely
Right. Then you'll know. I imagine this sounds like a lot. It's going to end up being just a couple of hours and you're done. But if it ends up being more than that, taking breaks and doing this over time is recommended, because you do get listener fatigue after a while, and you just start...
Or just fatigue.
Fatigue, which is what Tom has right now, which is why we're going on to the next question. So good luck with that.
Oh, we did that one. Yep.
Jason started listening to us just a few weeks ago, and he's only recently fallen down the rabbit hole of audio and home theater. It started when he tried out a DIY build of some small speakers for his computer, and he ended up realizing just how much he had been missing before. So now he's all in on audio. He wants a dedicated home theater. He wants to build one in his basement. So he already built speakers, so this dude's handy. So I'm going to have to keep that in mind when I answer these questions. He wants to carefully plan everything in advance, and he tends to do all of the construction himself. He also intends to build his own speakers and subs. He wants You going to say something already?
I was just going to say, we don't know if Jason is like a contractor or if he's a handyman or what level, right?
Right.
So that's important because when you're talking about actually doing the construction of an entire room, there are going to be certain things like HVAC or the electrical system, whatever, that need to be up to code.
Right. So if you don't
now-
know what you're doing, you can't kind of...
Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't actually do it yourself. It just means you need to have it inspected by someone who has the proper certification. Because if you're going to be touching the electrical, which I imagine you are, I imagine you'll be installing outlets and lighting and stuff like that. You can do that. You can physically do that stuff yourself, but it needs to be checked out by a licensed electrician before you close up the walls and things like that. So maybe Jason is a general contractor already. We don't know. That could be fine, but we're just saying for both Jason and for anyone else who's thinking of doing it themselves, it's not just as simple as I'm going to throw up some walls and throw in some outlets and put up my own lighting and everything's going to be just fine because I'm a handy person and I can physically do it. It's like you need to be within code. That's important. So that's all we're saying there.
So let's assume then that he is a general contractor and knows how to do all these things.
Right.
Because if not, then this question becomes infinitely harder, and I don't want that.
Yeah.
So he wants very good soundproofing so he can crank up things in the theater without bothering his wife upstairs. He wants 2 rows of seats with a 7.2.4 Atmos configuration. He'd like an acoustically transparent screen with the largest reasonably sized screen size. And he wants a custom lighting system, possibly a tray ceiling with one of those fiber optic Starfield ceilings. I will say I kind of hate those, but if you
I'm
want
not
it,
a
that's
big fan of the Starfield thing either.
that's something that seems cool, and until you live with it for a while, and then everybody goes,
And you turn on your projector and you're like, why do I even have this thing?
Yeah.
When it's dark and the Starfield would look okay, I need it to be off anyway because my projector's on right now and I don't want extra light. So,
But anyways, if you want it, hey man, who am I to stop you?
yeah.
So the theater section of his basement will be taken down to the studs. So at this early stage, he's trying to figure out the best way to construct the dedicated room, and then how the screen, seating, and speakers should be laid out. Total length of the theater room should end up being about 26 feet. But because of the placement of the stairs in his utility room, he'll have whatever. He's got different widths in here.
Yeah.
It's about a 15-foot portion of the room can be 14.5 feet wide, but the rest of the room will only be about 10.5 feet wide. So, lots to think about, lots to plan. Can we get him started as far as orientation, layout, and just the general shape of his room as it goes? First of all, you want to go to soundproofing.com. And
Soundproofing Company.
That's it. And start reading everything they have.
And he did mention, like, in his email, double drywall, green glue, sound clips with hat channels. So it appears as though he has already gone there, or at least someplace with very similar information. But that's primarily about your walls, right? So he's like, this is a basement, and I'm assuming the 14.5-foot long wall there is an exterior wall. And I'm assuming that the 26.5-foot long wall on the side there is an exterior wall. Those don't really need to be soundproofed, right?
Right.
Even if you're talking about decoupling the wall, you're going to be putting up at a minimum some framing to hold your drywall along those walls. That's all you need, right? Have some insulation inside that framing, one layer of drywall. That's all you need there, because you're not blocking sound from getting to the ground outside your basement. So don't spend money there.
There's a bedroom in there and an office, and then there's a
those
bathroom.
ones, right? Those ones on those sides. But I'm saying for the exterior walls, you're not worrying about soundproofing.
Yeah. Is there there's not a door at the back of this thing? There's not, is there?
Well, so it appears as though the idea was you come down the stairs and there'll be a door that doesn't currently exist, but he wants to close off the section. So you come down the stairs and he wants to put like a door right in front of the stairs. Now, this is something I wanted to address. I don't know. He sent us a diagram, a 3D mock-up, and I don't know if this is perfectly to scale or whatnot, but there is a very important thing, which is at the bottom of your stairs, most places code says you need a 3-foot square landing at the bottom of those stairs. And believe me, you want that anyway. Even if code in your area allows for it to be 2.5 feet or something, you want a 3-foot square landing at the bottom of your stairs, because what if you want to bring a chair downstairs?
Gotta be able to turn that corner, dude.
You got to be able to turn that corner. And really importantly, and people don't think about this, but I mean, in the future, someone could be in a wheelchair and you have a stair lift
Yeah.
So that you can get into the basement, even though you're making use of a wheelchair or just a walker or a scooter or something like that. You need to be able to turn a wheelchair or a scooter around in the landing at the bottom of the stairs. So going by the diagram that he sent, it looks like there's very little space at the bottom of the stairs if he puts the wall where he's drawn the dotted lines.
Yes.
It looks like a foot. That's not enough. You need a... So draw yourself a 3-foot square, put that somewhere at the bottom of the stairs and go, okay, my walls need to fit around this, which is okay. It doesn't look like that would destroy his theater plans. The door just might need to be a little bit, farther back. It might need to be beside the utility room.
So does that mean that everybody, it looks like anybody who comes down here is going to have to go into the home theater? Because there's right now there's no right
landing.
Turn. There's no landing. There's no right turn out of this thing as you're coming down the stairs.
But that's what I mean. I don't know if that's actually drawn the way it really is, right?
Yeah. Okay.
But assuming that it is drawn the way it is, that's really, you got to have a landing at the bottom of those stairs. So that's just something we want you to be really aware of.
So I think you should do, at least to begin with here, is that. Say option A, option B. I'm not really sure.
So option A is he could have the projection screen on the wall that's 14.5 feet wide, or he could have the projection screen on the wall that's 10.5 feet wide.
You're going to have it on the 14-foot one, yeah.
The 14.5 foot. We both agree that's where your screen should be.
What I would do is actually build a false wall there, acoustically transparent screen. You talked about that already. I don't necessarily think you need that. I think that you could just put a fixed frame in there and then put some in wall or in whatever and speakers,
or even just regular speakers with some insulation around them
to the side and underneath. I think that's what I would do. It would be cheaper and it would be easier, and you could actually keep all your gear up there too. I mean, it could be all there. He was
actually saying he has room in his utility room to put his gear in there if he wants to. So that's another option as well.
Might be taking a chunk out of that utility room so you can have a landing. So maybe don't.
Well, although that might be load bearing though, where those walls are, I'm guessing is load bearing. Very likely.
And then I would do is I would put the 2 rows of seats sort of flush with the wall that's next to the stairs. So you have a walkway on the left side of your theater, and there'd be 2 rows of seats on the right side there.
No, it'd be a walkway on the right side of his theater because he's facing the 14.5 foot wall.
It'd be the left side because I want the because it's a 10.5 foot, right? I want the seating to be flush with the wall that has the stairs on it. So on the left side of the theater would be the walkway.
Why would there be a walk? Oh, to get to the seats.
Get to the seats. What do you mean? Why would there be a walkway?
So either way, what we're saying is the skinnier portion of your room is the back.
That's the back.
And the wider portion of your room is the front.
That's right.
That's how we would orient this room. I want to talk about HVAC just in the sense of you need to consider HVAC.
Yeah.
Air needs to be able to get into this room and back out of this room. You don't necessarily need it to be forced air. It doesn't have to be. This could just be a simple air exchange. But there has to be some way for air to get into this room and out of this room. Again, if you're a general contractor, you know that, and that's fine. If you're not, though, because there are some people who are like, I got a space in my basement, I'm going to throw up some walls and close it in, and they don't even think about air circulation, right? Because it's not always top of mind. That's one of those things, if you aren't licensed for that part of this build, physically, you could do it yourself, but make sure someone who's licensed checks it out before you close things up. It's really important to have proper airflow.
Yeah.
So I just want to mention that as a concern.
Right. So I basically that's where I would start.
Yep.
You need a riser for your second row of seats. I guess. I mean, you could just not.
Yeah. And if you're concerned that the front of your theater is wider than the rear of your theater, and you're like, how are my surround back speakers going to work in such a scenario? It's like we've been saying in previous questions, it's fine for your surround back speakers to be physically quite close to one another. And it's not as though you've cut the width of your room in half, right?
Right.
You've taken what was 14.5 feet and lost about 4 feet of that on the right-hand side. So you can still have your surround back speakers on the back wall. They'll be closer together to one another, but they'll still be centered for the room. And he was saying, okay, screen size, what should he go for? Seating distance, what should he go for? I'm going to suggest to you a 135-inch diagonal screen.
Mm-hmm.
And that works really nicely for all sorts of reasons. It means the screen is about 10 feet wide. So on your 14.5-foot wall, that leaves you a nice couple of feet on either side for your front, left, and right speakers to go. But 135 is also a really nice size for most projectors. They can light that up really nicely without it looking too dim by getting too large a screen. You start going into the 150-inch screen size, things can sometimes start to look a bit dim, but 135, pretty much all the nice projectors can handle that. And if you sit 12 feet away from that, which means your front row of seats will be within the wider portion of your theater, that's going to look perfect, in my opinion. So if you sit 12 feet away, 135-inch screen, your second row of seats then goes into that narrower portion of your room towards the back, so maybe you have one less seat in your second row. I think that'll all work out really nicely. And I would go for a drop ceiling, because this is a basement.
Yeah.
So go for a drop ceiling.
Yeah, that'll make everything a lot easier. I mean,
much.
Yeah.
Get the acoustic ceiling tiles, right? And that serves as your damping and as your barrier. Then you insulate above that, and it's already decoupled because it's a drop ceiling. You've hit all 4 parts of Soundproofing Company's, system for soundproofing. You've got the decoupling, you've got the mass, you've got the damping, and you've got the insulation. So drop ceiling.
Yeah, what you said. I'm sorry, I was looking at something else.
I know.
Mark. This is what I was looking at. Mark came across the Marseille, I'm guessing that's how that's said, M cable series. They are HDMI cables that include a small video processing chip on one end. The gaming edition actually seems to genuinely improve the look of many games since it applies anti-aliasing and scaling. They also offer a cinema edition, which describes upscaling all content to 4K resolution and applying noise reduction, edge restoration, and detail
That's
enhancement.
the word they used.
Yeah, whatever. Like it didn't.
It's edge enhancement.
It didn't have an edge before. You had to restore it. What is it, like an old house? At $120 for 3 feet, $130 for 6 feet, $140 for 9 feet. Are any of these worth considering? No. Can I say no? I would consider the gaming edition one if I had a crappy computer.
I mean, I would consider putting that same money towards a higher end graphics card.
Well, that's what comes to my mind too. I'm like,
Yeah.
Okay, so just say you're only using the 3 foot one, which is really quite close. That's $120. You telling me you can't get a decent video card for $120 that can do all this stuff for you, where you can actually configure it? Because this thing doesn't seem to be configurable.
They did mention for console gaming where you don't have any choice of the output.
But really? Do you think that's the biggest? Whatever, dude.
Well, I mean, it's a potential thing. I mean,
not the cinema one. Not a chance.
No, the cinema one, no. Because I mean, first of all, if you're watching 4K content to begin with, you don't need the 4K scaling.
That's not going to stop it from doing
enhancement.
it, though. All the rest of that stuff, it's going to do all that stuff to it.
Yeah, you don't want the edge enhancement. That's going to be terrible.
And where's this noise coming from? For the noise reduction, it's 4K. It's bit for bit. I mean, whether you watch VHS
and
on
if you're
this
watching
thing,
1080p, I mean, again, this is, I don't want anything with edge enhancement, that's for sure. And what can't scale things fairly nicely from 1080p to 4K?
Nothing. All of it does it.
So I don't see any reason to go for the cinema edition. The gaming edition is a maybe for me, because just the anti-aliasing alone, I'm like, that's a maybe.
I don't like anything I can't turn off. I'm sorry.
I know. Yeah. Built into the darn cable.
So Mark has a mini DSP being shipped to him and received his calibrated UMic 1 from Cross Spectrum Labs. So he started playing with Room EQ Wizard a little bit. There are lots of different test tones that Room EQ Wizard can generate and measure with plenty of drop-down menus and settings that he's getting used to. But on the AV receiver side, how should he adjust its settings for taking measurements? For example, if he wants to measure the native response of each of his speakers at all of his seating positions so that he can better understand where they ought to be crossed over into his subwoofers, what should he do? Should he set the speakers to large so that his AV receiver isn't playing a crossover? Should he set it to pure direct so the AV receiver isn't playing any processing of its own to the signal? Well, you should definitely not have it crossed over if you want to hear how it sounds,
Yeah.
where you want the crossover to be. So you would at the very least set them to large. Pure direct, you would turn off all processing anyways, but pure direct is a guaranteed method to make sure that it's just sending the signal out pure, which is what you would want to do. Absolutely.
Yeah, in this scenario where you're like, what are my speakers doing before Odyssey is applied, before my crossovers and bass management are applied, before any of the distance level settings, anything is done to the signal, what are my speakers just doing on their own? Then that's absolutely what you want. You want them set to large or full range, whatever the word is in your AV receiver settings. And yeah, using the direct or the pure direct mode ensures that all processing is turned off. The only other tip I would give you is that some of these test tones are only available as a stereo signal.
Right.
They only give you a left and a right. And you're like, how do I check what my surround speaker is doing or my surround back speaker is doing? Well, in this scenario, you leave your surround speaker physically where it is, but you just wire it to one of the front binding posts. Because all you need is for the test signal to get out of that speaker and for you to measure what that speaker is doing at each of your seats.
Right.
So it doesn't matter which binding post is sending the signal to the speaker. Don't get caught up in it being a channel thing. It's not. It's just get the signal to the speaker, whatever you need to do that, and measure the signal, because it's just the pure signal coming out of that speaker at each of your seats, and that'll give you a good idea visually of what's going on.
Chris has a gaming PC with an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1080 graphics card. I imagine that's a good one.
Pretty high end.
Is that a good one?
Pretty high end. It's good.
Does it need a cable? Should we send him the cable? He wants to connect the PC to his AV receiver and projector in his home theater. He'll play games on the PC and play music, but the PC is not going to be used for movies. So simply connecting the PC's HDMI output to his AV receiver is straightforward enough. I'm glad we didn't have to walk you through that, Chris. The wrinkle comes in the form of wanting to connect an Oculus Rift VR headset. He's been reading that it only seems to work properly if the Oculus Rift is connected directly to the graphics card's HDMI output. So in order to keep the PC connected to his AV receiver, you have to use one of its DisplayPort outputs, while the Oculus Rift takes up the only HDMI output of his graphics card. So there are DisplayPort to mini. I'm getting tired. I can't read anymore. I'm sorry, guys. There are DisplayPort to HDMI adapters. Will that work for getting the audio and video from his PC to his AV receiver and then up to his projector? Is there any possibility it would degrade his audio quality? I have never used one of these, so I don't know.
So a few things to unpack with this. So first of all, there are the DisplayPort to HDMI adapters. You do need to be a little bit careful because there were some early ones that limited the resolution to 1080p, and I'm not sure if he has any 4K stuff going on. There were some that limited the copy protection to HDCP 1.4. And of course, if you have any HDCP 2.2 sources, you need to make sure that the adapter is capable of doing all that. One that seems to be quite highly rated, I haven't used it myself, but there's a company called Club 3D, and their DisplayPort to HDMI adapter is available at Amazon for $30.
You just like it because it's got 3D in the name. You just want 3D to still be here. You're trying to support 3D, Rob. Let it die.
I was searching for one that for sure handles 4K at 60 hertz, that handles HDR and handles HDCP 2.2, and this is the one that kept coming up. So it's not an unreasonable price at $30. Yeah, that'll work. Now, that seems to have been the issue with connecting the Oculus Rift to a DisplayPort output. Some people were using, because it is an HDMI plug on the Oculus Rift, so some people were using a DisplayPort to HDMI adapter that was limited to the 1080p output, which isn't high enough for what the Oculus Rift requests.
Right.
So I think that's where a lot of the problem was happening.
Okay.
So either way, he needs a DisplayPort to HDMI adapter because one of these things is getting plugged into that.
Okay.
Either way, he needs it. Either way, he needs the one that can do better than 1080p and HDCP 1.4. So either way, he's probably getting this $30 one.
Okay.
Now, as far as the audio goes, that's no problem at all. Okay. The adapter will absolutely change. You can send all your lossless audio formats out of your DisplayPort connection. That'll get converted to the HDMI side of things. The audio won't change at all. So that's not a concern. if you decide you want to use the display port to connect the Oculus Rift, the audio doesn't come out of that for that. So if you're concerned at all, connect your AV receiver to the to your GeForce GTX 1080 graphics card's HDMI port, exactly as you would have if the Oculus Rift weren't in this picture, because now you're like, okay, it's HDMI, it's HDMI audio, I don't have to worry about anything there, and use the DisplayPort to HDMI adapter for the Oculus Rift. There isn't any audio going through that scenario at all, so it's absolutely nothing to worry about there.
Sounds good.
Yes.
The second part of his question is moot, so I'm going to skip it.
That's right. Yeah. He was asking, does he need a separate audio card, a sound card? No.
No, he does not.
Either way, this is going to work.
Jeff. Last week we discussed Jeff's top middle speakers. He had positioned them the same distance apart as his front left right, as per Dolby's guidelines, but then that put them 10 feet apart, and he wasn't getting the sense that they were directly overhead, which is what he was hoping for. So we made some suggestions, and he wanted to respond. Okay, we told him a couple of things. He said, okay, he can't easily angle the top middles. They're bolted flush to the ceiling.
Okay.
Moving the top middles inward is possible, but he's really dreading the work, and it would mean sacrificing an expensive diffuser panel on his ceiling and making things look a bit weird aesthetically. So he's actually leaning towards the idea of moving them back and angling them similar to his front height speakers, but he isn't quite sure if that would work due to the soffit. They'd only be about 4 feet behind him, so the angle doesn't really quite work out for rear heights, which is what Rob suggested. So he asks, is there any way to make this placement work? You know what? I'm going to make a semi-controversial suggestion here. And again, I think it's just a test thing. I'm wondering if because you're saying he's the top, they're bolted flush to the ceiling, he can't move them. Well, can't is a real strong word. I have a feeling you could probably get away with it if you really tried.
No, he said easily. He can't move them easily, because we were wondering last week if they're on mounts that can be pivoted, then that's not a hard thing to do. But he's like, they're bolted flush, so it's not a trivial thing.
No, I understand. So what I'm wondering is if you actually went up there and had, again, this is what children are good for, put them on ladders and have them stand up there with the first thing that comes to my mind is like a tray that you use to put chicken on in the oven.
Reflect the sound
and
off
reflect. You basically just angle them slightly in on the outside of those speakers, just to see if that makes a difference for you. Because what we really want to know here is if angling them will work. So we're not going for the perfect thing. We're not looking for that's exactly what I want. Children, you can never come down from those ladders. No, what you want is like, I think that's making it better. Is it now worth it to you to angle these speakers?
So I'm coming at it from, I think you're going to end up taking these speakers down from the ceiling, if only temporarily, to reposition them no matter what you do. Yeah. So when you unbolt them from the ceiling, try just angling them where they are.
You could do that too. I'm trying to get him to make the decision one way or the other as far as whether or not they're worth angling.
Right. But I'm like, so I agree. The second suggestion of you don't want to remove the panels you've got. You're like, it's going to look weird. I already have this expensive panel. I'm like, yeah, okay, let's not do that.
Fair enough.
I'm totally fine with that. I am sort of leaning the same way as Jeff. I think having them behind you makes sense. Now, he was like, they're not going to be at the correct elevation angle to call them rear heights. Well, then we call them top rears, because that's where top rears would go.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Not as far back as rear heights, but not as far forward as top middles. In between those two things are top rears. And that's exactly the position he would have. Now, having them behind you, angled towards you, and you've already said having them in front of you, angled towards you, is working for the front heights. I don't see why that wouldn't work for you for your top rears. And in his email, he was like, will I get that sense that sound is directly above me? It's really hard to stereo locate anything above you because you don't have an ear on the top of your head to triangulate things that way.
Your ears don't rotate like this, rotate upwards like a cow's ear so that you go, oh, look at that.
That's right.
There they are. Oh, it's behind me. I got it.
But at the same time, the intention was to have top fronts and top rears anyway, which means that sounds tend to be sort of fore and aft. And honestly, let's say you put the speakers 3 feet behind you, because they don't have to go 4 feet. That's just the farthest back they could go, because he was like, Rob said rear heights. I'm trying to get them as far back as possible. Well, they don't have to be. What if they're only 3 feet behind you? You label them as top rears, which would be fine, and you angle them down towards your seat. I'm like, that's going to sound pretty good, in my opinion. That's going to be like, yeah, that is above and behind me. I can tell that is above and behind me.
Yeah, I have a feeling that. I mean, I don't think he wants to angle them. I think that are these like in-ceiling speakers? Is that the deal?
No, these were the HTM 200 SEs. These are like satellite bookshelf type speakers, and he already has a mounting system for his front heights that lets them hang down from the ceiling and angle towards his seats. I'm like, so use that same mounting system I was saying last week as rear heights, but
the ones that he's got at the top middles, he just needs to build a wedge, right? Just a piece of wood that is a wedge.
And just angle them
in order to angle them. I know it's going to be a hassle. I hear you. I wouldn't want to do it either.
But yeah, so is this other thing of moving them rearward is also
you want top middles, dude. Just get what you want. How often do you get people telling you this? Get what you want. Don't compromise. Stick to your guns. Get what you want. You want top middles. I know it's going to be a hassle. You're going to end up having, one way or another, you're going to take these things out and move them.
One way or another, you're unbolting these things from the ceiling.
It's happening. So, or you just live with them the way they are and then complain about it all the time, which is probably what I would do because I'm lazy.
I can't disagree with any of that. Yeah. That is also true.
David. David, I'm sorry, I hate this question, but let's go. Cat, he says. David wants a pair of floor-standing speakers, nothing too fancy or expensive, but anything with the fabric grill is going to get scratched. Do we have any suggestions for speakers that come with a metal or otherwise scratch-proof exterior? No. We do not.
I mean, I couldn't think of one off the top of my head at all.
Doesn't the new ELAC speakers have a metal grill? I could have swore they said they had a metal grill. I just saw a speaker recently that had a metal grill. I thought it was a new ELAC,
really?
a Dente once. I might be wrong. I was looking at a speaker.
If they're a Dante's, they're not inexpensive. That's $2,500
First of all,
each.
Metal grills suck. Okay, let's just go there. Metal grill.
I mean, they're totally fine for subwoofers.
Yes,
because those frequencies are going to wrap around a metal grill like it's not there at all.
But metal grills on actual speakers, it's like putting a dampener in front of your speaker. It's reflecting some of the sound back. You remember those monster speakers that came out years ago that had like the fancy. They look like I want to say they look like the bead curtains that you go through, but they weren't that. They had some that looked like that. They had some metal grill ones too, and it was shown through measurements that it was affecting the sound. Like
it was problematic.
Taking the grills off made the biggest difference.
That's reminding me now that maybe Funk Audio at one point had something that was almost like a cage style grill.
I can't remember the last time
for their subwoofers they did, but I don't know if they ever did for their speed. But again, it wouldn't fit into the not too fancy or expensive category because they were crazy expensive and very fancy.
Yeah. Okay. So when I was up in New York with my cousin, they had these things, and I can't for the life of me remember what they were called, but it was something like mildly offensive. You know what I mean? Like when you read it, it's like this little like sonic device or whatever, the ultrasonic device that he had like at the doorways of this one room. They want their cat in this one room because they had an old couch and they didn't want the cats scratching up the couch. So they put it there. He says that the only thing that worked. I can find what that is that could keep the cat out of this room for you, and then you can buy whatever speaker you want.
See, I don't believe that the cat is actually going to scratch these speakers. I think this is a human problem, not a cat problem. I think this is someone predicting that the cat is going to think of the new speakers as their scratching post.
He's already buying cheap speakers anyways. He said that. Nothing too fancy or expensive. Who cares if the cat gets them? I mean,
just take the grills off.
Well, I mean, you don't want it to get the drivers. That's about the only thing you really care about.
It's just my whole family has always had cats. My parents have cats. My sisters have cats. My aunts and uncles have cats. They've all had speakers in the house. The cats have never scratched any of the speakers. People think the cat is going to look at the grill and say that's a scratching post, but they don't. Like they don't care about a big black monolith They're like, give me the couch. That's what they want to scratch.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if this is actually a genuine thing or if this is a human predicting something that isn't actually going to happen.
Well, we don't know if it's going to happen
cats
or
don't
not.
scratch
And
speakers.
I don't want to be responsible if he buys a speaker and the cat like eats the first day.
If he knows if he's had speakers before and the cat has always scratched the speakers, then okay, that's different. I don't really know if this is going to happen, but nonetheless, tower speakers with metal grills, I couldn't think of any. I was thinking get something where you could take the grills off. I was thinking something like Klipsch's towers, because the tweeter's protected by the horn, the woofers are metallic, and they're higher up.
I would not. Oh, first of all, I would not get floor standing speakers to begin with. I would get a bookshelf and put it on a stand.
Yeah.
And okay, I know you're like, it's going to jump on the stand and knock the speaker over. How fat is your cat to begin with? Second, you can get the stands that lock in, and you can fill them full of kitty litter. You obviously have kitty litter, so you can fill it through a kitty litter or sand or whatever you want down there to make it super heavy, so your ginormous cat doesn't bowl it over on its way to going to eat whatever most recent piece of furniture it has consumed, or perhaps a car. I don't know. So I mean, that way your speakers are fairly high up on metal poles that the cat can't necessarily get to. So problem solved. You do not. You do, and then there's plenty of speaker subwoofers that have metal grills on them. So once again, problem solved.
You could get electrostatic speakers, and the first time the cat tries to scratch those, it'll possibly die. But if not die, get the shock of its life. That'll stop it from scratching.
I mean, I don't know if killing the cat is the solution to this problem. I mean, it is the solution. It is a solution to this problem. I'm not sure David's like, dude, those guys told me to kill my cat. Just remember, it was Canadian. It was not the American who said kill the cat.
It's a lot of static electricity going through those stators.
Yeah.
Those are metal. I wouldn't recommend electrostatic speakers.
I mean, you could get the Martin Logans, though, right? Aren't those big grills?
Those are electrostatic. That's why.
That's what I'm saying. But they're big grills, right? They're just the rounded grills, or the Martin Logans.
Stators.
Which ones are the? That's basically like a piece of metal sticking up there. That's not like.
Not doing anything. They're like a Magnapan.
Magnapan. That's what I'm thinking about.
Yes.
Get those.
That wouldn't be a good choice. That might get scratched. That's just a big old piece of Mylar sitting there. Not doing too much. I wouldn't go for that. I honestly, my choice for you here is a Klipsch tower. If it's got to be a tower, I say get a Klipsch tower.
I say get a bookshelf on a speaker stand and
I
let
do not
Darwin fix it. If the cat knocks it over, Darwin will fix that problem away.
If this is a prediction that the cat is going to scratch it, I think you're fine, because I don't think your cat's going to scratch it.
There we go. All right, that's the end of the podcast. Let's go ahead and thank our listeners of the week. We're going to thank John and Jason for their donations. They went to www.avrant.com and clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. So thank you, John. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, John, Jason, thanks so much for those donations.
Also want to thank Dave, Chris, and Terry for supporting the podcast. Dave for contacting Accessories for Less, Terry for contacting SVS, and Chris for trying to help me get a new phone. Thank you, Dave, Chris, and Terry.
Yeah, Dave, Chris, Terry, thanks so much for helping out the podcast, and congrats on the purchases from Dave and Terry.
For all of our Patreons, which as of right now, I'm going to click on it. Let me see if...
Did it go up?
I don't know.
Did it go up?
I'm going to say it was 11 when we started the podcast. It is now... Dun, 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 dun. Oh, come on, computer. Don't do this to me. Are you serious? It's not that hard of a page to open.
It really isn't.
It is
There's
still
not much
11
going on over there.
Still 11. So thank you.
It is still 11.
Our 11 patrons. So thank you guys.
It is go patrons. But yes, thank you everyone. And
don't forget if you
obviously some folks have chosen to donate more than $1 a month, because the dollar amount showing there is greater than 11. So thank you.
3.5
That's
on
very
average.
generous.
And if you have any questions for RBH, Brent Butterworth, or Surge X, please send them to question@avrant.com.
Yeah. So RBH, speaker company, Brent Butterworth, former editor-in-chief of Home Theater Magazine, and you still see his writing all over the place, Wirecutter, Sound of Vision, places like that, and Surge X, which is a power protection company. So any topics that you want to ask, please send those questions in. We'll hold on to them, and we're trying to set up those interviews.
All right. That's it for this week. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.